What missing persons case is the most confusing or doesn't add up? Asha Degree. Asha Degree was a 9-year-old girl who went missing from Shelby, North Carolina in the United States. In the early morning hours of February 14, 2000, for reasons unknown, she packed her book bag, left her family's home north of the city, and began walking along nearby North Carolina Highway 18 despite heavy rain and wind. Several passing motorists saw her. When one turned around at 1.3 miles from her home and began to approach her, she left the roadside and ran into a wooded area. In the morning, her parents had discovered she was missing from her bedroom. No one has seen her since. Story 2. Wendigoon on YouTube did a video on them that's pretty succinct in telling the story, but to sum it up, it's about the Yuba County 5. It's been a while, so I may be misremembering some details, but I recommend watching the video or looking it up yourself. 5 guys headed out to a basketball game out of town and never came back. Their car was found halfway up a freezing mountain in the middle of winter, over 200 miles from their hometown. Evidence was later found at a small station further up the mountain that at least 2 of them stayed there but didn't light any fires. Most curiously, they didn't even turn on the gas heating system in the shed outside that would have kept them alive. These guys drove 200 miles away from where they were headed, up a freezing mountain in the middle of a snowstorm. If someone or something was following them, and that's why they veered so far off their course, then what the heck was it that made them that terrified, to the point that they didn't even light a fire or use the heating system that would have saved them? Story 3. Xavier de Pont Leon. The whole family, parents, and 4 kids went missing overnight in 2011. Employers, schools, and family members received strange letters informing them of their absence or departure, with one letter claiming they were entering a witness protection program. 2 weeks later, authorities found the bodies of the mother, the children, and the dog sitting behind the house. They investigated and retraced the father's whereabouts to the south of France. He was last seen leaving a hotel a few days before. The region was thoroughly searched, but he was never found. Story 4. In 2014, 3-year-old William Tyrell went missing from his foster grandmother's yard while playing with his sister. His foster mother and grandmother were reportedly watching them play outside, and the foster mother went inside to make a cup of tea. They then noticed they hadn't seen or heard him in a while and searched the house and yard. In 2021, police began searching National Parkland near the grandmother's home. They also revealed the foster mother and grandmother were persons of interest in his presumed passing. Earlier today, the foster mother pleaded guilty to mistreating another foster child who was in her care. She has also been charged with intimidating and stalking a minor. Her husband has also been charged with the same crimes but pleaded not guilty to all accounts. The foster grandmother has now departed. Basically, police believe that William passed away while in the care of the foster family and that they tried to cover it up. Police are recommending that the foster parents be charged. Photos of William went viral at the time of the disappearance. He went missing while wearing a Spider-Man costume, and the photo that was distributed was taken minutes before. Story 5. Bryce Laspiso was driving to his parents' house, a 3-hour trip, after an argument with his girlfriend. The argument was apparently due to his alcohol and video game fixation and misuse of prescription medication. Partway through the drive, he pulled off the highway and just sat there from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. A roadside assistance worker checked on him twice and said he seemed fine and coherent. Bryce told him he would be carrying on back to his parents' house shortly. Sometime later, his car was found only a few miles away, driven off an embankment. It was nowhere to be found. Story 6. Amos Mortier went missing from his home in Madison, Wisconsin in November 2004, along with his dog, Gnosis. His friends and mother became worried after not hearing from him for weeks. His friends broke into his house to find it cold, dark, and halfway unpacked. His dog's food bowl was full, and a record player was playing eerie music throughout the house. There was also a check from his grandmother on the desk. His dog Gnosis would later be found miles away at a neighbor's house. The dog was unharmed but skittish. This was a cause for alarm as Amos took Gnosis with him everywhere. The police did not take Amos's case seriously and stopped looking for him after 3 days of searching. They had friends who were involved in the local substance trade, and Amos might have been selling grass. Foul play suspected in his case, ranging from his friends to a police cover-up. The police have been absolutely terrible at handling his case. The details of this case are even stranger than what I posted, and I might have some details off as it's been a while since I've looked at it. Story 7. Mary Lou Bastwick disappeared on July 18, 1972 from Waverly, New York. She was dropped off by her father to babysit at a friend's house on her 16th birthday. Her mother stopped by later with a cake and presents, but the people in the apartment told her that Mary never showed up. However, her bag was found in the residence. Nothing else was ever found. There was another girl, around the same age, Sharon Costin, who was abducted and terminated in a nearby town about a year later in October 1983 in Sayre, Pennsylvania. The man was convicted of that crime, but he always denied doing anything to Mary. One of the people who testified against him and was given immunity was also a suspect in Mary's case. Mary's mother thinks there is a connection, but nothing was ever really found. Sadly, I've never seen anyone cover her disappearance on any podcasts or YouTube shows. Story 8. It's no longer a missing persons case, and I'm so sorry, but I can't remember her name, but somewhere in Mexico, I think it was, there was a family with 2 daughters, and their maids lived with them. The older daughter was walked to her bus stop by the maids, and when they came back, the younger one, Paulette Gebara Farah, who I think was 5, was missing. The parents were still asleep and woke up to the maids looking for the girl. They couldn't find her in or around the home. It turned into a huge police case. They searched the entire house, had news reporters in, and they even sat in the girl's bed. A few weeks later, the girl was found, stuffed between her mattress and the wall. The worst part is that the parents seemed so unbothered. The father just sighed and left for work, and the mother was standing in the kitchen, smoking and drinking while the maids were looking and while the police and reporters were in the house. Story 9. Stephanie Stewart, a 70-year-old fire lookout in Alberta, Canada, disappeared from her post on August 26, 2008. To this day, the details of what happened to her remain unknown. In the early morning of August 26, 2006, a fellow fire lookout was sent to check on her after she failed to call in a routine report. Her cabin and tower are accessible by road, and the coworker immediately noticed that her truck was still in the driveway. She was reported missing at about 9 a.m. that morning. Upon entering the cabin, authorities found a pot in the stove that had boiled dry in her bedding, 2 pillows with blue pillowcases, a burgundy bedsheet and a Navajo pattern duvet, and her gold watch were missing. There were also stains in the cabin steps. Her disappearance launched one of the most extensive ground searches in Alberta's history, but they found nothing. Forensic evidence has ruled out an animal attack or a medical episode that caused her to wander off. Investigators have concluded that she was met with foul play, but that's all. They never found her, and the case quickly went cold. Story 10. Fiona Pender. The 25-year-old woman was 7 months pregnant when she went missing from her apartment in Tullamore, County Offaly on August 23, 1996. She was always in close contact with her family and loved ones, but she was never seen again. Her boyfriend, John Thompson, was the last person to see her leaving her ground-floor apartment. Fiona left her passport, clothing, and credit cards behind. There were no signs of a struggle in the apartment, and it's believed she left on her own accord and got into a vehicle. In 2008, a small wooden cross bearing the name Fiona Pender was found on the Slieve Bloomway at the border between Laos and Offaly. This discovery led to the belief that Fiona was buried in the Slieve Blue Mountains. Story 11. Marshall Iwasa was a good guy. He came back to his hometown to visit his family and friends, and everything, by all accounts, was good. Left to take the 2-hour drive to where he was living and never made it. Instead, it was recorded that he spent the entire night trying to get into his storage unit, and then there was nothing. A week, or maybe more later, his truck was found 12 hours away on the back road in the middle of the woods, burned to a crisp. The belongings thrown about everywhere. There's no sign of Marshall, and from what I remember, the family was adamant that some of the things inside the truck, burned or not, were missing. Things they knew he had. The truck was even missing parts. It's been years, and there have never been answers. Makes me sad and fearful of long travels. From what I know of him, he was a fantastic friend. I hope they get closure one day. Story 12. On June 21, 2020, Noah, 14, left home on his bicycle at 5:45 p.m. to meet up with friends at a park across town. It was a route he had traveled many times before. He was carrying his backpack, which held his laptop and several books. 5 minutes later, Donohoe was spotted on CCTV footage riding down Royal Avenue, a busy shopping district. By the time he reached the end of the street, his backpack was gone. No one witnessed how he lost the bag, and cameras didn't capture what had happened to it. At 6 p.m., a driver saw Donohoe fall off his bike at an intersection. The citizen tried to help the boy up, but Noah quickly rode off. CCTV next captured Noah riding his bicycle miles away from where he was supposed to be meeting up with friends. He was missing his helmet. A witness confirmed seeing the young man without any clothes riding in a neighborhood far from his planned route. Again, CCTV was unable to capture where the boy had lost his belongings. At 6:03 p.m., the final recording of Noah captured him getting off his bike and walking down the side of the house toward a gated Seaview park. It was the last time he was seen alive. And Noah failed to come home that night. His mother, Fiona, immediately became concerned. He had promised to call her at 6:30 p.m., and he was typically very punctual. At 9:30 p.m., she called the police to report him missing. Authorities immediately began looking for the boy, and search and rescue teams soon recovered his bicycle in the neighborhood where he was last seen on camera. They also found his phone near the route he had been cycling. His clothing was never recovered. After 6 days, the search ended when Noah was discovered in a storm drain half a mile from where he had abandoned his bike. Police believe he entered a drain at Seaview Park that a maintenance worker had mistakenly left unlocked. Though Donohoe had been in the drain system for days by the time it was found, it showed very few signs of water damage. A medical examiner concluded that he had passed away from drowning. The tide comes twice a day in those tunnels, so he would have been submerged twice a day, said Fiona. But the only water damage to Noah was his hands and feet, and there was sewage in that tunnel, so sewage and bacteria would have done horrendous damage. Also, there was no rodent damage, no insect damage. Mer Clark, a superintendent of the police service of Northern Ireland, announced that there was no evidence to suggest foul play was involved, and the coroner agreed. Clark stated that he believed Noah had suffered a head injury after falling off his bike and had become disoriented. Noah Donohoe's laptop was later found in the possession of a known local criminal named Daryl Paul, who had previous convictions for theft and armed robbery. Paul claimed that he had found Donohoe's backpack near Royal Avenue, and he was never officially implicated in the teen's termination. In the years since Donohoe's passing, his mother and aunt have launched a campaign disputing the official version of events that led to the boy's disappearance. Fiona Donohoe alleged that 4 witnesses heard screaming near the spot where her son was last spotted. She claimed that she went to the police for the story, but they never followed up. Story 13. Suzanne Streeter, Stacy McCall, and Streeter's mother, Cheryl Levitt, went missing from Levitt's home in Springfield, Missouri. Suzanne and Stacy graduated from high school on June 6, 1992, and were last seen leaving a graduation party around 2 a.m. on June 7, 1992. The girls had plans to meet their friends for activities the next morning, and when they didn't show up, a couple of friends went to the home looking for them. The home was intact, with no signs of violence except for a broken porch light. The three women's belongings, including their purses and cigarettes, were all inside the home and undisturbed, but there was no sign of them. Their friends accidentally deleted a voicemail that was potentially suspicious and, trying to be helpful, cleaned up the broken light on the front porch. These actions left police with no real clues, and over the years, the police have investigated several suspects but were unable to find any evidence of what happened to the woman. Story 14. In 2017, Anna Machesco was a 43-year-old wife and mother to her 4-year-old son, living in Malvern, Pennsylvania. On April 10 of that year, she reportedly left for work at about 9:45 a.m. and has never been seen again. According to Anna's husband, who last saw her that Monday morning, she left for work in a panic. She failed to return home that evening and was eventually reported missing 2 days later, on April 12, 2017. Anna last spoke with her parents on March 28, 2017, to plan a trip to Poland. That visit was meant to celebrate her father Zygmunt's 80th birthday. The father-daughter duo had a very tight-knit relationship, but then the very next day, on March 29, 2017, Anna canceled the trip out of the blue. "Sorry, I can't come. Kisses, Anna." She first texted her mom regarding the trip's cancellation. The following day, on March 30, Anna sent another text. This time, though, it was directed to her father and was written using broken Polish. This pushed her parents to believe that someone else had been using Anna's phone. Anna didn't write this message. Her mother, Janina, claimed. The following week, Anna's coworkers also noticed that she did not show up for work. Instead of calling to inform the office, she reportedly texted to say she was sick on April 3, 2017, which was highly uncharacteristic. So once Anna did not show up for work the following Monday, her coworkers decided to contact the police. Authorities found the circumstances to be suspicious, given Anna's age and the fact that she had a young child left behind. This prompted police officers to carry out a welfare check at Anna's home on Monday, April 10, 2017. Upon arrival, though, the officers found that no one was home. Just 2 days later, on April 12, Anna's husband called the police regarding his wife. He claimed he had not seen her since April 10. In mid-May, there was a break in the case. Anna's car, a navy blue 2011 Audi, was discovered less than 2 miles away from her house on May 8, 2017. According to Trooper Roberts, the car was found in the back of a parking lot in a private community. It was not located along any of Anna's known routes. The vehicle and wooded trails behind the parking lot were subsequently searched, but not a single shred of evidence was located, and Anna's case turned into an investigation. Story 15. Rebecca Rish disappeared from her sister's house in Berlin, Germany, just before leaving for school in 2019. She was alone with her sister's husband, who was a suspect for some time. He was seen driving in a highway toward Poland the morning of her disappearance and could not explain why, later stating that he was on substances. Some of Rebecca's belongings are missing, as well as the belt of a bathrobe and a blanket. Dogs found traces of Rebecca, such as her hair and her brother-in-law's car. Even though her family was caught in contradictions, so far investigators have not been able to prove anything. Her sisters and parents do not believe the brother-in-law did anything and still think Rebecca is alive somewhere. No one has seen her since. Story 16. Chance Leslie Engelbert was a 25-year-old husband and father who had recently taken a new job in Moorcroft, Wyoming. Before he disappeared while visiting his in-laws in Gering, Nebraska, on July 6, 2019. Just a week before Chance disappeared, he lost his job. The coal mine where he had worked as a welder laid off 600 employees. Chance knew he had to find a job quickly, so he accepted a position with a local propane company. He was to start his new job when he returned from a 4th of July visit with Bailey's family in Gering, Nebraska. Chance, his wife, Bailey, and their 3-month-old son made the 220-mile drive to visit her grandparents in Gering, Nebraska. On Saturday, July 6, Chance went golfing with Bailey's dad and her sister's boyfriend. Bailey spoke with Chance while he was on the course, and he seemed to be in a good mood. She said the guys were drinking and having fun together. A short time later, Chance called her back and asked her to pick him up. He said he was upset over a comment one of his golf partners made about his new job. Bailey said they didn't argue on the way back to her grandparents' house, but when they pulled into the driveway, Chance got out of the car and walked away. Bailey said at first she wasn't concerned because when Chance got upset, he would sometimes take a walk to cool off. After he walked out of view, Bailey tried calling him. When he didn't answer, she went looking for him, but she couldn't find him. He finally picked up her call at 7:46 p.m., told her he was walking south toward Kimball, and hung up. Later reports from his friends indicated he had told him he was walking north toward Torrington, Wyoming. The last known person to speak with Chance was his friend, Matt Miller. Around 8:46 p.m., Chance's aunt received a cryptic text message from him at 9:08 p.m. Shortly after, his phone went dark. A strong thunderstorm blew through Gering around 8 p.m. that evening. Bailey's family speculated he may have sought shelter inside a local business or nearby building. When the storm was over, Bailey's grandfather drove around town looking for Chance, but his search came up empty and no one has heard from Chance since. It's been 4 years since Chance was last seen in Gering, Nebraska. He was wearing a short-sleeved bun-up Wrangler shirt, dark blue jeans, a belt with a rodeo buckle, old-school roper boots, and a black and white trucker cap. He's 5 feet 9 inches tall, about 190 pounds, with sun-lined brown hair, a mustache, and a goatee. Story 17. Jodi Huisentruit, a former news anchor for KAMT in Mason City, Iowa, went missing on June 27, 1995. She was leaving for work. She had just talked with a coworker, saying she was running late and was on her way. She never showed up, so her coworkers called the police to her apartment. They found signs of a struggle and her things scattered around her car. I'm a local and am the same age she has been missing. Her case has always been a huge subject, and many leads and theories are still talked about every now and then. There are FindJodi.com billboards around Mason City that say, "Someone knows something. Is it you?" A couple of years ago, someone spray-painted one saying Frank Stern's machine shed across the bottom. That billboard was quickly removed, though there are photos of it online. Frank Stearns was a longtime detective for the Mason City Police Department who worked in the case and apparently had a machine shed built around the time of her disappearance. There's also something about photocopies of Jodi's personal journal that were anonymously mailed to the local newspaper. Later turned out to be the wife of the Mason City police chief who had taken copies of the original journal, which had been in police custody since her disappearance, home with him. But I'm not sure much more information came out about it. Mason City officials have been accused of being involved in her abduction and/or covering things up. I don't think they have been investigated, though. I read they've been a pain to work with or seem super sketchy in interviews about certain things. Despite the many leads, nothing has been solid or concrete evidence. There's a lot more information online if anyone's looking for a rabbit hole. There's so much on the case. He only mentioned a few things and not in great detail either. It's wild. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 18. The Bradley sisters. ID just did a special on them too. Their mom admits to leaving her 9 and 5-year-old daughters alone in an apartment while she worked all day. However, her 2 oldest daughters were taken to their grandmothers, which raises the question of why all of them weren't taken or why the oldest were taken, but not the youngest. In the special, the mom actually changed her story because phone records proved she wasn't home that last night. She had actually left them home alone overnight and all day. A note was left saying they were going to the park, but authorities do not believe the girls wrote it. There was also a supposed voicemail left that some of the family heard, but it was accidentally erased before the police could hear it. That voicemail points to the boyfriend, but again, there's no proof it ever really existed. The mom is so infuriating because she's upset that everyone thinks it's her fault and insists that she's doing the best she could, but she wasn't, and it is her fault, even if she's not actually responsible for the disappearance. I 100% think that she played a part in it, or at the very least is a horrible mom. There are even more irregularities, but yes, it's a super weird case. Story 19. Arjan Kampenhout was a Dutch cybersecurity expert who went missing while hiking in Norway. Initially, his plan was to visit Svalbard. However, he unexpectedly traveled to Bodo instead. A good friend of his suggests this may have been because of his work, saying there's a pretty important NATO security center there. He definitely knows about that. He checked out of his hotel on August 20, but he was not on his flight home. 3 weeks after his disappearance, Norwegian police found his kayak around the area where they had also found more of his belongings. A witness said they saw Arjan on August 30, accompanied by 2 other men. On that day, his cell phone had also been switched on for 20 minutes, after which the SIM card was taken out and swapped with a different SIM. He was never found, and the case remains unsolved. Story 20. My uncle, my mother's brother from Mexico, recently visited our family in the USA. During his visit, we talked a lot about their teen adventures growing up in Mexico. This reminded them of a particular story that nobody in their town has ever been able to explain. One of their favorite stories involved how they would sneak into bull riding shows, known as jaripejos, instead of paying the entry fee. One day, as the show was gearing up to open, a random white-colored bull showed up at the site. None of the bull owners knew who the bull belonged to, but since he was there, they decided to include him in the show. Fast forward, and it was time for the white bull to go next. A local rider decided he wanted to ride the bull, set up, and got into position. After a few seconds of bucking and galloping, the bull suddenly started to head toward one of the sides of the ring. To everyone's surprise, he jumped straight over the fence into the crowd before disappearing over the horizon. The strange part is that the rider was still on the bull. To this day, nobody has heard or seen the rider or the white bull. It makes no sense why the rider didn't just let go and fall off the bull. It was as if he could not let go or something was holding him there. That is one of my favorite stories my family has ever told. Story 21. This may not entirely fit the brief, but it's a very compelling case. Patty Vaughn argued with her soon-to-be ex-husband in the lead-up to Christmas, and when he learned she was dating someone new, he became even angrier. And her family tried to visit her on Christmas Day, told him she was unwell and couldn't come to the door. This was highly suspicious, as she was a good host even when she wasn't feeling well. If she had legitimately left in her car or wasn't there, why would she say she was sick and couldn't come to the door? This suggests to me that he knew she had already departed. Even if she was legitimately ill on Christmas Day, something that would probably prevent you from answering the door to family in most cases. This is compounded by the fact that he was the only one who didn't help search for her when she was declared missing. This is extremely suspicious. Her car was later found with a slashed tire and traces of her samples. Samples were also found inside the house. Because he was a building contractor, investigators heavily suspected him and had to scan the concrete foundations of 2 schools he had poured to see if evidence was hidden there. It appears they were not. She was never found, and her husband was never arrested. He also seemingly turned their 2 kids against Patty's family, so they have no contact now. I think it's pretty obvious who committed the crime, but the fact that they never found her remains is sad. The case seems clear, but all the leads were dry. Story 22. Nicholas Barclay, an 11 or 12-year-old boy who seemed to be somewhat neglected at home, went out to play with his friends. He phoned his older brother, trying to get him to give him a ride home. The brother refused, so Nicholas walked home and was never seen again. About 4 or 5 years later, someone showed up claiming to be a now 16-year-old Nicholas Barclay. His sister flew to Spain, not France, as was originally reported, to meet him and confirmed he was her brother. He went home with her, got an American passport, enrolled in high school, and lived with Nicholas Barclay's sister, only for it to be revealed that he was not Nicholas Barclay. He was actually a French con artist in his 30s who had pretended to be other people many times before. This was arguably his most incredible con yet. This guy had a genuinely sad backstory and even used his own genuine scars and past broken bones to claim he had been mistreated as Nicholas Barclay. What's especially strange is that the whole family, with a possible exception of his brother who did not partake in the excitement and his mother, refused to let him live with her, seemed to believe this man was Nicholas Barclay. This was despite him looking nothing like him, being twice his age and speaking with a French accent. Makes one wonder about the family. If they didn't recognize their own son or sibling, perhaps some of them really wanted to believe that a miracle had occurred and their family member had been found. Or maybe some of them didn't want to rock the boat and risk looking suspicious when they knew this guy wasn't who he said he was. In other words, perhaps they had something to do with the disappearance and knew this was a scam but couldn't say why they knew. It leaves one to wonder, was the whole con artist detail completely unrelated to what really happened to him? We'll probably never know, but I would love to. Story 23. Skye Metalwala. A 2.5-year-old has been missing since 2011. According to his mother, he was sick, so she put him in the car to go to the hospital. She said she ran out of gas and left Skye in the car to go get fuel. She returned 90 minutes later, he was gone. Police found her car to have plenty of gas, and her story closely resembled an episode of Law & Order, SVU, that had aired the previous evening. The parents were involved in an acrimonious custody battle that the mother refused to participate in the mediation for. I don't care who did it, but one of these parents needs to be found guilty. I just don't understand why nothing has happened and this baby's still missing. There's so many layers to the story. An older child and a baby born after Skye's disappearance were removed from his mother's care by DSHS. Anyway, while looking for the story, a headline popped up that 9 kids have gone missing in Washington so far this year. Story 24. Dyatlov Pass Incident. A group of 10 experienced hikers regularly went trekking and camping. On the day they were scheduled to set off, one of the group members dropped out at the last minute due to personal circumstances. The other 9 were found and passed away sometime later, but the way they were found is disturbing. The way they were moved around, placed, and the marks in the snow are all very strange. The group went through something hellish. It must have been something intelligent and beastly. If it had been a bear or a wolf pack, the bodies would have been eaten. The injuries and the way they were placed in an orderly fashion is odd. I can only think it was a yeti, aliens, or a savage lunatic who lives in isolation up in the mountains. I recommend checking out the story yourselves. The guy who missed the trip is one of the luckiest people on Earth. Story 25. A local case is that of Stacy Peterson. Her husband was a town cop. She was his 4th wife and 30 years younger than him. Her disappearance isn't as mysterious as some others here. Drew Peterson, her husband, was eventually convicted of terminating his 3rd wife, but Stacy's just gone. She's become the urban legend of this town. Is she buried in concrete at the promenade, which was under construction at the time? Was she dumped in the canal, as her sister believes? Was she locked away somewhere and left for good? There are 1,000 theories, but no one knows but Drew. She's gone, and I believe he ended her. Since she's never been found, she's a specter over the town. Story 26. On February 18, 2018, Ryan Shtuka was 19 years old when he went missing from Sun Peaks Resort, BC, Canada. He was leaving a party just after his friends. They had walked out the door as he was putting on his coat and walking toward the door. Never made it back to his apartment, where his car was located. His phone, his belongings, including a baseball hat and winter clothing, his car keys, and he have never been found. There has been no trace of him despite the area being heavily searched. On April 30, 2023, a Facebook post from Please Bring Me Home thanked everyone who has called in over the last 5 years. They were also looking for a caller who contacted the group in April and left 2 messages in the same day. His family still conducts regular searches 5 years later. I think about this case often. Story 27. Andrew Gosden went missing on September 14, 2007. For unknown reasons, in the week leading up to his disappearance, Andrew decided to walk home from school rather than take the bus. His house was located approximately 4 miles away from the school. On the morning of September 14, 2007, Andrew struggled to wake up, which was unusual for him. According to his mother, Glennies, he was also uncharacteristically irritable. Reverend Alan Murray, a family friend, witnessed Andrew walking across Westfield Park and heading to his usual bus stop just after 8 a.m. However, from there, Andrew made a detour and went to a nearby ATM where he withdrew £200 of the £214 in his bank account. As CCTV footage would later reveal, Andrew returned home, which was now empty, and changed his clothes. He grabbed a bag, his PlayStation Portable handheld console, keys, and wallet. Nothing else. Most notably his passport, £100 of birthday money, and the charger for his PSP appeared to be missing from his bedroom. Andrew then proceeded to take a train to London and was never seen again. A ticket seller who worked at the station in Doncaster came forward to say that she remembered selling a ticket to Andrew, a one-way ticket to London, on the day he went missing. She said she had tried to convince him to add a return ticket since it was inexpensive, but he was adamant that he only needed a one-way ticket. Andrew arrived at King's Cross Station in London at 12:20 a.m. and was captured on CCTV exiting the train station at 11:25 a.m. Story 28. Kris Metalwala. I grew up in the area where this took place, a quiet university town. It was the kind of place where you felt safe leaving doors unlocked, and my friends and I routinely walked around late at night, just out of boredom. Nothing about his disappearance makes sense. He left a house party that was near the downtown core and was later seen near his apartment. The next time he was seen was more than 15 kilometers from where he had been downtown. He was spotted at 5:30 a.m. by a man who was heading to work at a correctional facility. Kris was walking and carrying a reflective driveway marker. At some point, Kris turned back and disappeared into the woods. His footwear was later found near the Tantramar River, and it was clear from the trail he left that he was lost and most likely disoriented. He was very intoxicated when he left the party and was not at all dressed properly for the temperatures that night. I personally think that he was taken for a starlight tour. A starlight tour is when an individual is taken to the outskirts of town, stripped of most of their clothing, assaulted verbally and physically, and left there in the elements in the dark. Usually the police are the perpetrators, and indigenous individuals are the victims. I don't think it was police in Kris's case. I also think there are several people who know exactly what happened that night. Anyway, many years later, and his mom is still searching for any sign of him. Story 29. Paige Renkoski was a 30-year-old substitute teacher who disappeared from the side of Interstate 96 in broad daylight. Her car was found unlocked and running by Michigan state troopers with her shoes, purse, and an open beer inside. Oddly, the car was not initially processed as a crime scene. The troopers simply had it towed. Renkoski drove her mother to Detroit Metro Airport for a departing flight in the late morning of May 24, 1990. After dropping her mother off, she visited with a friend in a nearby suburb. She left her friend's house, then stopped at a convenience store and purchased a beer before getting on the freeway to head home. She was last seen standing outside her car, talking to two men on the shoulder of Interstate 96 near Fowlerville, Michigan, about 50 miles from the store. Her disappearance is one of Michigan's longest-running cold cases. Her mother, who kept the case in front of the public as much as possible, passed away in 2017 without the closure she had so desperately wanted. There have never been any serious suspects publicly identified. Story 30. The case of Rachel Pratt from Garden City is one that plagues me. She was last seen watching a movie with her brother inside her family's residence near B and Albert Street in Garden City, Kansas, at approximately 1 a.m. on January 16, 1995. Earlier, they had attempted to call their mom because her brother had set a mattress on fire in the basement. Their mom phoned back but only got a busy signal. Her mother came home at 2 a.m., earlier than usual, and realized she was gone. She stayed up all night waiting for Rachel to come home, but Rachel never did. She disappeared under suspicious circumstances and has never been heard from again. She left all of her clothing and personal belongings at her home, including her identification and social security card. Only her coat was missing. Rachel was a good student at the time of her disappearance and was involved in several extracurricular activities. She reliably obeyed her curfew and had no history of running away from home. Rachel had recently been caught shoplifting a pregnancy test at the local Walmart. That's when her mom found out she was pregnant by her boyfriend. Rachel's mom filed charges, and Rachel was supposed to be a witness against her boyfriend, who was being prosecuted for unlawful relations with her. Because Rachel disappeared before she could testify, the charges were dropped. Police incidentally treated the case as a runaway. Several people in the community viewed the boyfriend with suspicion. I've always wondered about the burned mattress in the basement. Also, her sister, Rennie Pratt, was featured in an episode of Snapped. Her ex, in court deposition, stated she had attempted to end it all after telling him their stepfather had done terrible things to one of her sisters. The Garden City Police Department has flown to California to question her. Story 31. The case of Chris Creamers and Lassane Froon, two Dutch tourists who went missing in Panama, is technically not a missing persons case anymore. However, while the case is considered closed, the official story simply does not add up. The two girls went for a hike and never returned. Eventually, their clothes were found folded in neat piles near a river, with their phone placed right on top. It was several months before any evidence was found. One of the most chilling aspects was a piece of skin that was found hanging over a tree branch. The thing was, this was several months after the girls had gone missing, and the skin was not decomposed as it should have been for that long. When their phone was recovered and analyzed, the photos were strange. Initially, they were normal, with pictures of the two girls laughing, smiling, and having a good time. At one point, one of the girls was no longer in the photos, and the remaining girl was not smiling in any of them. Then there were some bizarre shots of just the jungle brush in the middle of the night. There was also a pattern of the phone being turned on with attempts to call emergency services several times, but it was in a virtually non-existent signal area. The official story is that the girls went swimming, and so their clothes and phone were laid out, and then somehow had an accident where they fell over a waterfall in the river and drowned. That might explain the few fragments found in or by the river, but it doesn't explain the skin draped over a tree branch. The story just does not add up. There was a tour guide they had been using who ended up finding several of the girls' remains over the coming year, and yet no one ever really looked into him having something to do with it. There are a number of YouTube videos about it that showed the photos and go over a bunch of theories about what really happened. For some reason, this case sticks with me. Story 32. Layachi. The police work in this case doesn't really add up. They dropped the ball pretty hard. Layachi went missing from her hometown in Tupelo, Mississippi, during a storm in 1992. And from a town near Tupelo, and the local paper and a news channel both made podcasts that go into the case in depth. The one put out by the news channel interviewed the current chief of police, who was the investigator assigned to her case. He admitted that he hadn't followed up on many tips, one of which was a sighting of Lay walking down the road with a man several hours after she was reported missing. Lay's mother and stepfather, as well as a man named Mike Kearns, have been accused by the public of being involved. She was never found, and it is still classified as a missing person case. Rumors suggest that she's buried underneath the church's foundation or under the mall's foundation. While ground had been broken for both projects before her disappearance, the foundations were set afterward. Story 33. I'm not seeing Summer Walls on this list. She was a more recent case, and I think about her a lot. In the summer of 2021, 5-year-old Summer Wells disappeared from her home in rural Tennessee. It was initially believed she had wandered into the dangerous mountains that surrounded her house. However, stories from her parents and grandmother about the day of the disappearance began to change. They claimed she was planting flowers with her grandmother and then walked into the house, and that was the last they saw her. They have since changed these details. I'm a bit rusty in the specifics, but I believe it was suggested the flower planting happened the day before and was used as a cover story. She has multiple brothers who saw her walking around the house before disappearing. Her father has a history of cruelty, but was at work at the time of the disappearance. Searches were immediately started, but the wooded mountains surrounding the house are too dangerous for even trained teams to travel into. It was assumed she left the house through the basement and walked into the forest. However, a tracking dog followed her scent from the house to the road, where the scent was lost, suggesting she either walked out to a car or was carried to one. The area is supposedly a bad one with a lot of substance dealers and shady people. It has been over 4 years since she disappeared, and there have not been many public updates. Story 34. Nicholas Barclay. There's a documentary called The Imposter that I highly recommend watching or reading about, in case my recollection isn't 100% accurate. Basically, Nicholas Barclay went missing when he was a 13-year-old. A guy named Frederick Borden, who's known as the Chameleon and had impersonated others before, claimed that he was Nicholas. He called a missing persons registry and said that he was Nicholas. They contacted the family, and he was eventually flown to Texas, where Nicholas had originally gone missing. This dude was French and had an accent, so he made up a bunch of stuff, saying his kidnappers forced him to speak Spanish, which is why he had the accent. He also claimed that they altered his appearance through different surgeries. Nicholas had blue eyes, and this guy had brown eyes. The story made the news and all that. The detective who was involved noticed that something didn't seem right, and he didn't believe it was Nicholas. To sum it up, the detective was able to tell he was lying because his ears were different from Nicholas's. Yes, I know the imposter claimed he had surgery, but you'll have to watch the documentary for the full story. Nicholas has not been found to this day. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.